Ads ruining your favourite cycling podcast? Sick of shallow bike reviews? Escape Collective is different. We deliver the content you crave without the distractions. We're member supported, and that means ad-free podcasts, independent and honest reporting, and real conversations within a passionate community. It's a better way to experience cycling media. Join us at escapecollective.com/join.
Hello and welcome back to the How the Race Was Won podcast. I'm Dane Cash, and this week, just like every week, I'm joined by bike racing analyst extraordinaire Cosmo Catalano. Cosmo, how are you this fine Sunday, May 12th, on which we are recording?
I am hanging in there. It's a little post good, exciting stage buzz. Still there, but It
was an exciting Sunday stage, wasn't it?
And on paper, maybe wasn't going to be that exciting. But
I agree, and that's actually been the case a couple of times at this Giro. A race that has a history of having stages that on paper should be boring and then are, I would say. There's often quite a few kind of, in the past few years, very long, boring sprint stages. And we've had a couple of interesting finales where they weren't expected. We're going to talk all about that over the course of the show today. It's a Giro-focused show. We've got 9 stages in the bag so far. We'll also talk a little bit about the women's Tour of the Basque Country, where the favorite took the win. And then we will look ahead to the upcoming several stages at the Giro d'Italia. Lots to preview as we also cover what's happened so far. That's what we're going to do in the course of today's show. So let's kick things off with the headline of the Giro d'Italia, the Cosmo Catalano headline after 9 stages of racing here at the 2024 Giro.
It could be worse. I mean, that's kind of harsh, right? I
feel like it's been entertaining.
Yeah. Yes, it has had entertaining moments, and I think Pogačar is probably more entertaining, sort of winning the race as expected. Unchallenged. There are bigger gaps and worse people you could see there, especially for entertainment value. But I still don't think it has been a nail-biting, topsy-turvy kind of affair.
I think one thing that listeners, if you've been watching the Giro and if you've been having trouble at this point, because we're going to talk about this in a second, but at this point we already have a pretty serious GC leader. He's got a big gap. I think something that's worth keeping in mind is that, you get 21 stages of individual stage battles, and many of them have actually been quite interesting so far. And just because the GC seems like a foregone conclusion, although I would argue that it is not, much like last year, there was a rider who was doing quite well after the first week and change, who then left the race.
COVID.
So you never know. Anyway, just keep in mind that you got 21 chances to enjoy a battle, a daily win, which is great. All right. How has the first weekend change, the first 9 stages, been won so far?
Stage 3, Pogačar kind of proved our point with trying to play some games. Tried to break away on a sprint day with a little hill on it. Didn't work out. Thomas was right there with him, which was promising, but Tim Merlier kind of got his crafty way into his first Grand Tour stage win of the year. But we saw Jonathan Milan really kind of showing why he was that sprint favorite. Kind of big, long, fast lead out, kind of shouldered a little bit with Olaf Koy, and then was stronger and faster. Started sprint from forever out. Stage 5, we had a first, I think, real escape of the tour. 4 riders kind of coming into the finish. We saw Andrea Petrobon of Polti Cometa make what I was sure was a race-winning attack. Turned out not to be, kind of rolled back in from the other 3 in the group. Michael Valgren went for it. Thomas Benjamin went for it slightly after Valgren. And back.
Benjamin Thomas.
Thomas Benjamin. How can you tell? How would you know?
Yeah, it's a Michael Jordan situation. It's two first names, yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if that's really my canonical example of the two first names. But yes,
who
Benjamin
is the
Thomas.
canonical example? Wait, who is?
I don't know. I went to camp with a guy named Ben Ross George. That was
That's 3.
yeah, that was pretty.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
I wonder if he listens.
I doubt it, but who knows? It's possible.
Yeah.
Benjamin Thomas kind of came around, took the win there. And that takes us up to stage 6, which I think we have declared as interesting, although maybe more interesting because it wasn't as interesting as I feel like it could have been.
I think that final 5 minutes where you had 3 riders off the front, 4 riders, I guess, off the front, trying to stay clear. They did kind of attack each other. And then the least expected one, I think, was the stage winner. I was intrigued. I think in the end, for headline purposes, it was of those 3 riders. It was Pelayo Sanchez, Julian Alaphilippe, and Luke Plapp. I think Sanchez was probably the. I would guess if in a hypothetical ABC testing situation, Sanchez wins headline is the least clicked on of those stories. But I thought he actually made it quite interesting, and he played it perfectly tactically. So I enjoyed that.
I enjoyed that. It did feel a lot sort of like a little Italian semi-classic, the way the stage finish worked out. But the thing that I felt was lacking was really this was a race. It was sort of like the Roubaix stage of the Tour de France, right? This is a race where they put a stage in early in the race with non-canonical stage race features. They had some
gravel. We're talking about gravel. I don't think we said that.
Sorry. Yeah. So they have these non-canonical stage race features. You have these rolling hills there are sections that are steep enough to break up a group. But in a stage race, I think there's a little more reluctance, especially when they had a powerful group up the road. But at the same time, there were these big, wide open fields, good crosswinds, loose gravel. And nobody really hit out and tried to just rip the race apart. And I think part of that may have been that Ineos actually looked really well prepared for the terrain. Like they had Magnus Sheffield, who I always want to call Magnus because of all the Danish riders we have with that name. But Magnus Sheffield for Ineos rode to the front hard enough that he started thinning the group out. And Pogačar was a little bit isolated. He still looked strong. He still had teammates, but he didn't look like a guy who was about to do the thing that he has been doing where his team rides really hard and then he blows everyone up. And this is someone who won Strade Bianche. Like this is terrain where he has a very definite advantage over Thomas, who's not a bad classics rider, but also, hasn't really been doing it recently and occasionally.
A bit removed from his E3 win.
Yeah.
In 15? I remember that was like, we were podcasting.
We were.
And this was like 9 years ago. And I believe you predicted him to win the race. And that was like one of your best calls.
Yeah. I mean, I think the image that I have of him in crosswinds is of him getting blown into the ditch at Genwevelgem.
Yeah, Genwevelgem.
2 years earlier. But I mean, it seemed like a real opportunity for Pogačar to extend that gap that was not enormous at that point in the race. It was big, but it wasn't like, case closed kind of big. And it didn't really materialize. And I was a little bit disappointed by that. Not because I wanted to see Pogačar destroy everyone, because I really wanted to see like Thomas and maybe some other GC guys kind of hold up that attack, match Pogačar, maybe get in a situation where one of them goes up the road and he's worried about the other ones behind him. We see that gap start to shift.
Yeah, we didn't see much of that. I think I would think that part of it is the thing we always talk about with Pogačar and to another extent Van der Poel, which is that aura of invincibility on this terrain. And specifically, I think, wasn't it Strade Bianche was like where we were first talking about this, and this is the same. I mean, it's gravel in Tuscany.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it. It's that I think other riders are probably thinking, well, no matter how well we're positioned or how good we are at this, and like you said, Ineos was well positioned. They were driving the pace for a bit. I think maybe they were doing that in a defensive way, in a let's be close in case Pogačar attacks, as opposed to let's take it to him. And it's a shame that they didn't. Although I will let's get through the rest of the first 9 stages before I will present maybe a little bit later a racing argument for racing for second that nobody wants to hear it, but I think it's worthwhile to talk about why it's worth doing right now. Anyway, gravel stage ended with a winner that I don't think many people expected to win that stage. It was not the big GC battle that we were maybe hoping for, but it was Pelayo Sanchez who won the stage 6, by which point Pogačar only had a 46-second lead on the GC. And then that day was followed by the individual time trial, where his GC lead grew.
Substantially. And it actually only grew substantially at the very end of the stage. I mean, it was growing through the early part of the stage, but it was remarkable watching this race. First of all, seeing how much better Pogačar looked on his time trial bike than Geraint Thomas. It really looked like a bad day for Thomas. Cadence wasn't there, body was all over the place. Almost one of those days where you kind of give him a little credit for gutting it out, not completely imploding, especially because the rest of his team did really well. Tymon Ahrensman had his first, I think, big boy GC finish of the Giro. Magnus Sheffield was just in front of him. Filippo Ganna was 30 seconds up on all of them all day. Looked like he was clearly going to win the stage. At the final checkpoint, 2/3 of the way through the race, he is 47 seconds ahead of Tadej Pogačar. And then the last third of the race, slightly uphill, like 4% grade.
Not a huge climb.
Not a huge climb, but enough. I mean, I'm struggling to put into words how sudden that flip felt. I think to everybody. Yeah. The commentators, Ganna watching, maybe even Pogačar, maybe he and his team car were like, okay, this is our plan. Now we turn it up. And they were just, they had their guys out on the road giving them live time checks. But it was all of a sudden kind of flip. And then, Pogačar really had something on this last section, of course, that no one else did. I think that's probably just a combination of he's lighter than Ganna. He's still pretty aero. He probably did a lot of work in the offseason getting more aero after his not great time trial at the Tour last year. But all that came together, and he really showed that he was the strongest guy in the race by a broad margin.
He paced himself quite well. And those who read the Escape Collective stage-by-stage guide to the Giro will know that that finale could present some interesting pacing issues, quote unquote. That's what author Dane Cash wrote on that preview. So Tadej Pogačar did a good job of pacing that final climb when everybody else. Well, I mean, we had no idea really just how devastatingly better he was than everyone else until, like you said, the very, very end. He ended up only 16 seconds ahead of Ganna, but he put just under 2 minutes into Geraint Thomas, 1 minute and 59 seconds. And that is, for a guy, I mean, Geraint Thomas is a good time trialist. That's a skill set of his. If you look at the rest of the GC, field in this race, Thomas is one of the better GC riders in the TT. The only, strong GC contender, I think, that did better than him was Dane Martinez. I guess, Luke Plapp at the time looked a little bit better as well, but Thomas was up there for everyone, compared to everyone else in the GC battle, except Tadej Pogačar, who just destroyed the field and came out of that stage with a 2 minute and 36 second gap to Dane Martinez, 2:46 to Geraint Thomas. So a day that really, I think he exceeded expectations, Pogačar. And that's hard to do for Tadej Pogačar because expectations are high.
I mean, I think of all the stages, this might have been the one with the lowest expectations for him, just because he had that bad time trial last year. Why would he need?
I think you're right that expectations might have been low. But I also think that would be a mistake to have, because he didn't have a bad time trial last year. Right. Okay. So right? Like
his
he had a damn good time trial versus
time trial. I don't know that he had a damn good time trial relative to people who are not him or Vingegaard.
He was like a minute ahead of the entire field minus Jonas Vingegaard. So it can't be that bad.
He didn't look like a guy who, without time checks, without the radio, and he was thinking, "Oh, I'm having a great race." He looked like a guy.
It was a similar thing to Thomas.
Yes.
On this time trial here, where the look wasn't great. It didn't look great.
And but the look is important. The
look is important.
You get on a TT bike thinking you're going to feel like that, you're not going to be in a good head state to perform well.
Well, I think the look's really important here. Sometimes it's hard to read. Some riders are really hard to read, but I think that, like last year's Tour, for instance, showed us with that look when you could see he didn't look good. That was the very next day that he blew up completely. So that was a good indicator. The fact remains, though, that he was still way better than everybody except for Jonas Vingegaard.
Yes.
So I think it would have been a mistake not to think that he could have. Well, first of all, he was the favorite for this stage. He was the bookies' favorite to win this stage, and he did. But he did it even by more than I think expected. So coming out of that TT, Pogačar heavily in the GC lead. Immediately after the time trial, the road kicked up for a mountain stage, a
Hilltop finish.
5-star difficulty stage, according to the Giro. And to me, looking at the profile, because it's up and down all day, it looks like it's going to be hard to control. And I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe Pogačar is going to actually kind of take the foot off the gas a little bit. I think a lot of people, myself included, were expecting a breakaway day.
No.
UAE was not having it.
No, UAE was having nothing. UAE was gonna UAE this thing. They UAE'd it pretty hard most of the day. Not letting a lot of windows open for anything to happen except their usual routine. But Pogačar, I think, came in as they came into the real meat of the stage as he finally burned off Micah. There wasn't a lot of. I mean, we saw Antonio Tiberi kind of steal his curtain call there, steal his beats. I'm looking for the right theater metaphor. Basically, Micah pulls off, and it's Antonio Tiberi going up the road.
Yeah.
Others in the group chasing him, and we never saw Pogačar really kind of get that launch. He looked like a guy who was like, okay, this is the group. I'm going to hang out, and then I'm going to win the sprint. And
he was very confident in the sprint. But he did also himself chase down moves.
Yeah, I should. Yeah, I didn't want to make it act like he wasn't doing anything, but it wasn't like he was trying to break the group up and kept getting brought back. He was in the group. He was chasing people down, but he didn't look like it wasn't a smash and steal, a minute and crush the field.
Right.
And I guess that's the point I'm trying to get across.
I think part of it is this field. I think he probably knew, looking at the rest of this field, that he might be the most explosive in this finish, which he was by a country mile. You should watch. If you haven't seen the finale, it's kind of great. He destroys everybody in the first 100 meters of the sprint. And then he looks back like, okay, can I celebrate yet? And then he's like, no, I can't. I got to keep going a little bit harder. And then he did for another nanosecond, and then he celebrated. But he was so far ahead of everybody in the sprint. And again, I think this is an area where in the past, Geraint Thomas has been pretty good at this kind of thing. But the guy is, getting up there. Respectfully.
He said, well, let me go back to the time trial just for a second, because a reporter asked him point blank, all your teammates did really good except you today. And he just sort of said, thank you. And then after this stage, he said it was really kind of night and day difference. He said he felt a lot better. But I don't know if that's true. I think he maybe felt less bad. He didn't look as bad, but he also looked like a guy who was really there to not lose time versus someone who was trying to attack. And this is, like you mentioned, this is a thing that he has been historically good at. This has been a way that Geraint Thomas has won Grand Tours. And he really wasn't even setting up like a guy was looking for that. He didn't want to let any gaps in front of him open, but he wasn't ever looking to get closer, kind of move up, find a little space to rest near the front. It was very much a hang-on day.
And it was, in terms of that strategy, that was a smashing success for Geraint Thomas. That worked. He did just that. He didn't lose time. He finished, in the group. So that worked out. But you're right. I think, okay. First of all, he did technically lose
2 seconds, right? 2 seconds plus
I think it was
bonus?
a 2-second gap. So I should clarify. Yeah. But yes, generally speaking, he didn't lose a big chunk of time. And that was a successful strategy. Again, I'm going to hit on this in a minute, why I think it's kind of smart to be riding for second at this point. But before we get there, let's do the last stage here, stage 9. How was that one? Because it ended up being, again, a very entertaining stage that looked like it was going to be a sprint.
You had everything, right? Because you never knew what was going to happen. There was a break most of the day. Then there was a series of late attacks. You ended up with Jonathan Narvaez off the front, and convincingly so, coming into the final kilometer. There's actually a huge hairpin bend at around 900 meters to go. He comes around that with a good 10 seconds. And not only that, the group behind him still isn't fully lined out, committed to the group sprint. And then maybe 500 meters to go, 600 meters to go, Tadej Pogačar himself in the pink kit comes to the front, lines out the field. And keep in mind, UAE they didn't come here with a sprint squad, right? So, yes, Pogačar had a teammate near the front. Yes, he was involved in the sprint. But it looked a lot like Tadej Pogačar was remembering stage 1, where he didn't take the victory and he didn't get a lot of help from Jonathan Narvaez. Pogačar really visibly.
Are you implying that he chased down Narvaez as a revenge?
This is the thing people are saying. Who can know for sure?
Juan Sebastian Milano is the team sprinter. He did have a sprinter in the team who was good,
who's at the front and participated in the sprint. It wasn't just it didn't look purely out of spite. There was definitely a logic there, and also it's Pogačar, right? If he's near the front of the race and it seems like it might be interesting to attack or go hard, maybe he's going to do it. Maybe he was repaying a favor to someone else in the group, but either way, he got to the front, visibly accelerated the group. Like, things got more lined out. The gap to Narvaez was getting much, much smaller. Pulls off, sprinters take over. Looks like it's going to be Milan. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Olaf Koy finds 10 fast meters at the end of the race, gets about half a wheel, comes across the line and celebrates. Just a beautiful sprint stage, the way it's supposed to be done, with a lot of different dramatic storylines. Just mwah.
Koy in particular there did what I kind of expected him to do earlier in the race. I actually came in thinking that Koy was going to do a little better than he did do for the first few sprint stages. The stage stage 4, where Jonathan Milan just blew everybody away, Koy kind of faded pretty quickly in a sprint where he was like even with Milan to start and then pretty quickly went backwards. And I think stage 9 was a good bounce back for him because he beat Milan, head to head. When Milan got good team support, and I'll talk about that in a bit as well. I wanted to give a shout out to his teammate who's been doing damn good so far in this Giro. But now that we've done all 9 stages, let's kind of talk GC first.
Ooh,
so
okay,
I want to make this point that it can be kind of boring to race for second, and it's like probably the most aired complaint that you'll hear from fans. Oh, so-and-so is just racing for second. And I agree that it can be boring. In this Giro so far, I would say that it is so clear that Tadej Pogačar is better than everyone. It is so dramatically clear. If it wasn't already. So like after the first stage, the first three stages, the first show that we did, I said I didn't feel like Pogačar was that much closer to winning than when we first started because he was looking really good, but he hadn't blown everybody away. At this point, he has. He's so far ahead of everyone that something catastrophic will need to happen for him to lose. However, something catastrophic might happen. And if it does, the best chance, it's kind of sad, but it's true. I think the best chance that Geraint Thomas and Danny Martinez have to win the Giro d'Italia is to race conservatively, hold on to what they have, and just be there in case Tadej Pogačar goes home sick or crashes. And I'm not saying they're hoping for that. That would be mean. But I do think it is statistically their best chance of winning the race. And so if you want to race to win, I actually think you are racing to win by racing for second. And yeah, that's boring, and I'm sorry to say it. And I kind of hope they don't. I hope they don't do that because it's more entertaining. But that's probably the best chance to beat Tadej Pogačar. Just ride conservatively and, be there if he crashes.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. It's still pretty early in the race. It sounds weird to say that halfway through, but we've had, one real mountain day, another mountain day that was mountain-ish, mountain-esque, mountain light, but we haven't had a mountaintop finish with a group smaller than 3 riders on same time. So this is the climbs have not made the group go as hard as it can go. With any selective force. And I agree. I have no reason to believe that Tadej Pogačar would be anything but dominant in that situation as well. But it feels like, this early, you have your best opportunities to kind of sneak in time and bank it for later. Not necessarily over Pogačar, but over all the other people in the group.
Yeah, over the other guys, sure.
And I think a lot of the ways that happens is generally not by... You find those seconds, through cunning and through aggression. And I think, it's not inconceivable to imagine a situation that we did actually saw a lot of attacks, a lot of people kind of getting up the road on that stage 8 finish, where one guy goes up the road and Pogačar decides that there is just people behind him that are more important. I'd love to get the stage win, but I'd be handing it to Thomas if I chase this.
Right.
Like that sort of aggression, that sort of shaking things up. I actually had a lot of it on stage 8. I can't really complain that much about stage 8, but I think you've got to find those moments that are going to have similar time gaps as you would see on top of a climb like that, where it's clearly a big group. You can find those in sprint and hilly stages.
I agree, and I hope that they do that. I would say that stage 8 was a great argument for why, again, they might not, because while people did try, Pogačar sure loves winning Giro stages, and he did not seem interested in letting anyone else have their fun.
This is true.
And maybe that will change. Maybe he and his UAE team will say, okay, fine, you can win a stage now. But on stage 8, Rafał Majka was like live to everything until he dropped off, and then Tadej Pogačar himself just like immediately was following. And then once the pace slackened just a bit, Rafał Majka found his way back to the front and led out the sprint. So this is also my way of saying that Rafał Majka should get some serious credit for. I don't want to say like. I still think Tadej Pogačar would win this race pretty easily without Rafał Majka, to be perfectly honest. But that doesn't mean Rafał Majka doesn't deserve credit. He's done a really great job as a teammate, and this is a rider who he's been around for quite a while, and he's had a really cool career arc in that he himself was a, kind of a fringe GC type of guy, and then really made a name for himself as a breakaway star, winning 2 separate polka dot jerseys at the Tour de France. And now he's 34, which I guess it's older. I'm older than he is, so I can say that. And he's turned himself into this spectacular teammate who has been there for Pogačar through and through for the last, 4 years now? So yeah, credit to Majka, but that's a long-winded way of saying that Majka and Pogačar together are definitely making it harder for people to get those seconds because Pogačar himself wants to win all these stages, and it makes it harder. That was not officially my unheralded heralding, because I do have one. Okay. I wanted to herald someone. Simone Consoni has really impressed me this race. He's been a fantastic teammate to Jonathan Milan. He did a really great job on stage 4 of both chasing down a very late attack from Filippo Ganna and then still being there a little bit longer to then lead out Jonathan Milan, who most other riders, I think, when Consoni started to fade, it would have been a little bit early, I think, from most other riders. But Jonathan Milan, you can drop him off apparently at whatever, it was like 250 meters to go, and he still destroyed everybody. So that was really impressive. And Simone Consoni did kind of the same thing again on stage 9, helping to chase down that Narvaez attack at the very end. Pogačar put in a big turn, but then it was Consoni on the front, and again led out Milan. Milan had a great lead up for that sprint, and it was just that Milan couldn't kind of pull it off at the very end. It was Coy.
They should have dumped him off earlier. That's clearly
apparently they should.
And then Visma Lisa bike would come up, and then Coy would try to get out, and then Milan would go, and it'd be just like stage 4. I think
they maybe just need to lead him out early. You're right. In any case, Consoni though, working really hard in both of these situations, and I think he deserves a lot of credit for that. And unlike Pogačar, who I feel like even with less team support would still be destroying everybody, I don't know that Milan would have gotten his stage win, for instance, without Consoni helping to chase down Filippo Ganna. And there very likely could be stages coming up where, again, Milan gets a win because he had a great lead out to help him, thanks to Simone Consoni, who himself has some talent of his own. I mean, he's top 10 at a couple of classics this year. So it's you always like to see that. I think if you're a guy like Milan, a rider who then is willing to sacrifice his own, he could be a breakaway kind of stage winner, but no, he's going to go help you out. So there's my heralding of Simone Consoni. Any other thoughts about what's happened thus far at the Giro?
We should probably apologize a little bit to Ben O'Connor for spending a good amount of time critiquing his responses to Pogačar's acceleration, because we were specifically like, come on, you think you're going to hold Pogačar's wheel? But
we did extol him for doing it. I think I said I liked that he did.
Yeah, but we weren't like this was a good result. And also, how could you ever hold Pogačar's wheel? But finished the same time on stage 8. So he is technically hold Pogačar's wheel there, and it's now 4th on GC.
Right, he's 4th.
So
he's doing really well in that battle for like being there just in case Tadej Pogačar falls off or whatever ends up maybe happening. Ben O'Connor's right there. He's currently 41 seconds. He's 3:39 back on Pogačar. And so he is 41 seconds behind Geraint Thomas, but certainly within that range of being there to maybe contend just in case. So yeah, hats off to Ben O'Connor. Long race ahead. We will talk about the stages to come in a bit, but first, let's take a break. All right, let's do a little racing roundup around the league, because while the men were racing the first week of the Giro over in Italy, the women continued racing in Spain, and they will keep doing so next week. It's very exciting if you're into Spanish races. they raced at the Itzulia Women, a 3-day World Tour race in the Basque Country, where the favorite won. Her team won every stage, and somewhat intriguingly, she took the jersey off of her own teammate on the final stage, which was surprising, kind of, except that that's also what SD Worx did last year, except it was Marlon Reusser doing it to Demi Vollering. So I guess everybody in the team is happy because it seemed like that was the plan all along, and as long as you're planning on it and everybody agrees, sounds great to me. It's only not okay if that's not the plan, or if it's the plan to do one thing and then the plan changes, and then you put poor Sepp Kuss in jeopardy of losing the race. That's all I'm getting at here. What's your headline for the Itzulia Women?
I have a broader headline for the Vuelta, Itzulia, and Burgos, all in Spain, all falling very close to each other. It's sort of like a de facto women's Grand Tour, or the closest thing they have to a full, like, big, long block of racing like that. The only point I was going to make specifically relevant to the race was that Vollering did lead out Bredevold the first two stages.
Right.
So they probably had a plan there. Probably wasn't.
It does seem like they did, which is why it seems like it's kind of okay. There didn't seem to be any strife. There was no internal strife, as far as I could tell, on a team that has had internal strife pretty frequently over the past decade.
We're just trying to infer internal strife, right? We don't know. We see things that would suggest strife.
I have seen internal strife in this team. Like, there has been absolutely internal strife in this team. I mean, I've seen it in person with my own eyes, and we've definitely seen it on TV at Strada last year when we saw very clearly strife. I mean, that was, yeah.
All right.
But, yeah, generally it's inferred, and I don't think there was much this time around. Abby, Mickey, and company over on Wheel Talk will have more about the Itzulia Women. And, as we said, the Burgos race. A race for which the women's event is World Tour and the men's is not. That starts on the 16th. That's a 4-stage race. Should be another cool opportunity to see some high-level racing in Spain. In between now and our next show, we have another week of Giro racing. We have a total of 6 stages from Tuesday through Sunday, and a few of those stages will be serious GC battles, and then there'll be several days for the stage hunters. It will start off with a very hard stage. Riders will leave Pompeii, historic Pompeii, and they go right by, I think, the ruins of the city that surely if you're listening to this podcast, you're aware that this is a Roman city that was destroyed by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. Just in case you didn't know, now you know. It's a very famous historical site. From there, though, which it's close to the coast, they will head inland and go climb some very tough mountains towards the finish at Boca de la Selva, mouth of the woods, mouth of the jungle. Probably not a jungle. Yeah, it's a stair-step final climb, first category climb, and it is, I mean, yes, we could say this about every stage, but to me, it looks like a great place for Tadej Pogačar to attack and put a bunch of time in everybody because of that extremely steep nature of a few sections. Maybe he'll be a little bit more conservative. Maybe the breakaway gets it because it does look like a fine day for the break to get a big early gap on the flat section, and then, yeah, we'll see. But this is going to have GC implications. It's a steep finale. That stage 10 looks like a good one. And then we're going to have some days here for the non-GC types. There's what looks like a very clear sprint stage to follow, stage 11. Stage 12, hilly, could be a sprinter day, could be a breakaway day. We'll see.
It could be a Tadej Pogačar day. We don't
any day, right?
Yep.
Stage 13, I don't think is going to be a Tadej Pogačar day because there is. Does the race get above? All right, so the race starts at 2 meters. The highest elevation it climbs to, I think, is like 40 or something like that, 39, and then it ends at 15 meters.
The profile I'm looking at.
It's one of the flattest profiles I've ever seen.
I mean, part of the problem is I have the scale of the profile image I'm looking at is from 0 to 2,500 meters, and the stage just does not show up. I think the highest, there's no climbing. It's just.
I would say yes,
flat.
it obviously should be a sprint stage. However, the Giro, like maybe more than any other race, is like this. It's the race where like the Italian second division teams sometimes form a break that like the sprinters just miss out on for some dumb reason. We've seen it before. just in case it happens, I want you to know that I told you it might, but it's probably not going to happen. Stage 14 is the second time trial. It's a power time trialists kind of course. There's some rolling hills, but nothing too challenging. Could be another place for Tadej Pogačar to put a ton of time into everybody. However, I would think that Geraint Thomas and Danny Martinez might be on a little bit better form for this one. They are both pretty good time trials. We've already talked about Thomas being a good one. It does look like a good day for Ghana for the stage because there's not that climb at the end for him to get, a ton of time put into him by Tadej Pogačar.
He's going to be motivated.
He will be very motivated after spending all that time in the hot seat, which is kind of mean.
But why? Also, why Luke Plapp was in the hot seat with him, just hanging out.
Hanging out. It was.
You can do
it was
that.
Good TV.
You get one hangout when you're in the hot seat.
Maybe Ghana didn't seem to mind.
No, they were chilling. They were watching bikes.
Stage 15, the last day before the second rest day, is a monster. It's a long stage at 222K. They go over the Mortirolo, and then they finish with, it's technically 2 first category climbs, but it's kind of like one large climb with a section in the middle where it goes downhill, at least in terms of the profile. I'm sure the route itself, they're going to go up 2 different climbs, but it's a long finish that is mostly uphill.
It's got to be a good 5K at least, that descent, right?
I would think it's going to be a pretty fast 5K. It is
no,
apparently.
I'm just saying, it's you're not. You got at least 5 minutes of not pedaling as hard as you possibly can in the middle of that double climb, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't know about at least 5 minutes, right? They're going to go pretty fast, depending on who's descending, right?
60K per hour average speed. I don't know.
That is an easy math problem. But they could go faster than that. You never know.
They can't. I mean,
yeah.
It could just be if it's straight and fast enough and the corners are easy enough. Yeah, doable. But
in any case, it's a very hard finish, and it's the kind of day that I think could be very breakaway friendly for the stage battle. But the GC battle is going to have some serious implications. So by the next rest day, we'll have significantly more climbing than we've had because most of Pogačar's gap so far has been made in that big time trial. By that second rest day, we'll have had these 2 big mountain stages that kind of bookend this second week. You've got that first one, stage 10, and then the second one is the last stage before rest day number 2, stage 15. 2 big opportunities for Pogačar to climb and outclimb everyone else. Alternatively, 2 big opportunities for Geraint Thomas or Danny Martinez to get time on their rivals, or maybe for someone a little bit farther down the GC to try to sneak in an attack and get clear. Maybe this could be wishful thinking, but it could happen. We'll see. Fortunately, like I said, I feel like the battles for the stages have been pretty entertaining so far, and hopefully we'll get more of that. Last thing I wanted to mention before we call it for the week is that Cofidis, Benjamin Thomas, won stage 5, and there was a collective. Cofidis finally took a win because it had been just a little bit of time since that team had taken a win. I think if you look at the French teams, there is a little bit of a running theme of them not winning a lot. That's a thing. That's unfortunate but true. At least at the highest level, they tend to do really well in the second tier races. Cofidis, they got their win. Benjamin Thomas took a big win. It was great. I want to point out, though, that now that Cofidis has gotten their win, I feel like the attention should start to shift because Arkea Samsic has been pretty underperforming, would be the nice way to say it, all year. And they have not won a World Tour stage. They have not taken a World Tour level victory thus far in 2024. And if that weren't bad enough, they did not take any World Tour victories in 2023. So, as we head into this second week where there are some breakaway opportunities, I'm wondering if Arkea Samsic can get out of the doldrums the way that Cofidis did in the first week. We will see. I think their best shot is Jente Biermans, who is a classics-type rider. Maybe he can get into a breakaway and then win a sprint at the end. But I am hopeful for the Arkea Samsic team because I love their Arthurian-inspired jerseys, as everyone who reads my stuff will know. We'll see. It's definitely their time to try to get out of the doldrums. And with that, I think that's it for us. We have a big, busy week of bike racing ahead. Hope you can watch all of the Giro stages and catch all the other podcasts. Obviously, we mentioned this already, but you should check out Wheel Talk, where Abby and company will be talking about the Itzulia women, placeholders, and Geek Warning, and Performance Process, and the Rest Day, and Wade's show Overnight Success. They're all on the same network. So stay tuned for more, and we'll be back in a week. I'm Dane Cash, and who are you? What was this?
I'm Cosmo Catalano, and that's the How the Race Was Won podcast.